are now going to the top view shaping. So in the last video I showed you how to shape the side view, which you see here. I cleaned mine up a little bit from the last video, but now we are going to shape the top, right? Because right now if I look at my top view, it's pretty bulky, right? And I have my drawing over here for you, and that's not at all what my top view looks like. I added this little cutout here. Okay, so this is actually a hole in the center of my car, just so I could show you how to do that as well. So I added that, but basically what I'm doing is just curving the sides of my dragster inward and then rounding the top. Right, but the biggest thing that we need to make sure that we do when we do our top view is trying to keep the line of symmetry, right? Whatever we do to one side, we need to do to the other. Right, so if you curve one end of your car on the top, you need to curve the other end about the same amount. Like, I know it's not going to be perfect because we're doing this on TinkerCAD, but we're going to be able to copy and paste shapes, so we should be able to at least get the same size of the curve. I know it might not be exactly the same on each side, but we're going to try as hard as we can to make it as symmetrical as we can. Right, and we also need to keep in mind when we're making our top views that we don't hit into the CO2 cartridge. Okay, so we'll always be checking that as we shape the top view of our car. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is make that hole in the center of my top view. Alright, so I'm going to make it here. But this is why I said don't delete your CO2 cartridges yet, because as you could see it from the top view, right? And you could see where the axle hole is actually going to be from the top view. So don't delete it yet. Alright, I know it's tempting. I know you want to see what your car looks like without all those lines on it, which, trust me, we'll get to that in the next video. But what we're going to do now is we're going to get out a cylinder. Alright, so again, I'm making that hole in the center of the car. So I'm going to take out a hole, and what we need to do, I know for our side views we made everything really long, right, to make sure it goes through the whole entire car, right, the whole entire width of the car. But in this case, we need to make sure that these are tall, right, to go through the whole entire height of the car. So I'm gonna just pick this up, and again, you can make it as tall as you want, and I'm gonna push this through the plane just to make sure again that it is in fact going through the whole entire body of the car. And then you're gonna move it to the desired area, and you'll see that that dark spot come up. So that's what it's gonna take out right now. But like we remember in my drawing, it's kind of like elongated. So I need to make this a little bit wider, right? So I'm going to click on these black dots, and I'm going to get it to the shape that I like. Keeping in mind, you don't want to touch over here, and you don't want to cut into these holes as well, right? Because then the axle can't fit in. Right, so you don't want to go like this. Okay, I know it's tempting because there's so much space over here, but you definitely don't want to cut into that CO2 cartridge spot. So right now, I'm pretty close. I'm going to move back a little bit, and then I'm going to try and move this as close as I can before it hits the hole. So I think that looks pretty good. And then remember, right, you want to take away as much material as possible to make your car go faster, since that means it'll weigh less. And we want to keep the line of symmetry, so I'm going to try and get both of these as even as possible. I know it's going to be extremely difficult to do that, but I'm going to attempt, and I think that looks pretty good. So then once you have a shape going through your object for your top view, you can do the same thing like we did for the side view. Highlight the whole thing, group it, and there you go. You can now see that it cut out the hole in my car. Right, yes, it's not 100% smooth, but it did do it. Right, so now my dragster is starting to look very, very aerodynamic. Then I showed you that on the top, right, it's curved. It's curved on the top. But first, what I realized is, when I went back to my drawing, it's also curved on the inside, right? And I made my hole in my card kind of too large to even curve my sides in. So what I'm going to do is actually go back really quick and just make that hole a little bit smaller. There we go. And regroup it. And now that'll give me a little bit extra room to make these curved sides. So I still have to curve the sides and the front, but I'm going to do the front first, and we're going to use the fillet tool. Alright, so again, that was on page 12 in the shape generator section. So I need a curve here and a curve there. So we're going to need two of these, but we're just going to copy and paste it after we're done. Right, I need to change this first into a hole. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to round this, or move this. There we go. 90 degrees. For a second there, it wasn't working. For this side. Then I'm going to lift this up, right? We want to make sure that this is definitely going through our dragster. And then I could bring it in. Alright, and I know this part over here is sticking out. You can just extend it if you want, but the only thing is the curve's not going to be as clean. Alright, so I say worry about this later, because I'll show you how to get rid of that in the second video. But this curve looks pretty good, right? Like, if I zoom out a little bit more, you could see that the curve is looking fairly good. Alright, so I'm going to copy this and paste it so I can rotate it to put it on the other side. So you're going to highlight on that object, click Control C, Control V, drag it over here, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees for the other side. And there we go. Alright, so you might have to flip it. Alright, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to move this a little bit down because I don't think it's totally symmetrical. There we go. That's why I was looking off. But you want to make sure that it's totally symmetrical. So I'm going to move these down so you could kind of see now the curve in the front. So like before I had these up and it was going to be a flat edge, but I'm moving them down so we get a curve on the front of the car like that. I'm going to turn this around to make sure it's actually going to cut out in the front, which you can kind of see now that's the point that it's going to cut out. If there is a little bit purple in the front, all you have to do is just extend it outwards to cut that out. So now, the moment of truth, we're going to group this. And there we go. The curve looks pretty nice, right? That one looks pretty smooth, which is great. So the only thing that we have left to do is to curve the sides of the car, which we could either use a cylinder to do this, or we could use the rounded roof, which I think I'm going to use the rounded roof. So I'm going to bring that out, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Lift it up. And now I'm going to go back to my top view and try and position this. So like I said, this is going to be trial and error here. So I want this for the whole length of my car basically. So now you could see, right, now that I'm using this one, that it's actually going to cut out some of that part, which is totally fine. And some of you might be like, oh my gosh, Miss Dolce, you're cutting into the CO2 Dragster spot, which I'm not actually cutting all the way into the CO2 Dragster spot. Where I'm cutting is like the outside part of it, which is okay. You just don't want to go in like this, right? So if you stay a little bit outwards, that's totally fine. You just don't want to go in too much, right? Because if we look, the hole actually starts inward a little bit more. So you just don't want to hit into that hole, right? So you don't want to go into like that. You can, and then even if you go like that, since this shape is rounded, you could see it's actually cutting inside, right? So you want to be mindful of that. We really don't want to hit inside that hole. So I'm going to move this out like this. Look again from my top. There we go. And then I'm going to copy this and paste it and rotate this, right? So I have one for my other side. And I'm going to try and line it up. Again, it might not be perfect. And there we go. And then I'm going to highlight both of that, group it, and there we go. Okay, so you could see here, I did a pretty good job of making sure it was symmetrical. Okay, it's not exactly perfect, but it's pretty good. And there's my shaping for the car, right? So you could also shape the back with that fillet tool that I showed you. So the tool on page 12, where I have it in my favorites already. So this you could actually put towards the back and shape it so it's not as rigid. So I suggest you doing that if you don't have it in your design. Remember, right, like even though I don't have it in my design and I have these rigid edges, we could change it. Okay, just like I didn't have this hole there before for my my top view drawing when I had the last video, I added it. Okay, you could always add different things. So if you saw, like while we were going through this together, that you know, hey, you really liked having a hole inside of your car, you could add it if you want, of course. All right, you could always try and add new features to your car as you see fit. Like if I had to redesign my car right now, I would definitely round out this back edge to make it a little bit more aerodynamic, or definitely at least round it on the top, right? But I'm still just going to go with my sketch just for an example. Alright, but there is my top view shaping. In the next video, I am going to show you how to get rid of this line, the CO2 cartridge, which you could see here just from doing my top view. It actually took it away already, which is pretty awesome. You can kind of see like a little bit of leftovers here. But it did take away that CO2 spot. But I'm going to show you how to take it away and that line if you still have it in your design. So that'll be in the next video.